The emergency broadcast crackled across every communication device in the galaxy simultaneously. Captain Sarah Chen nearly dropped her coffee as the familiar voice of High Arbiter Zex Thul filled the bridge of the UES Prometheus. The massive alien's image flickered on the view screen, his usually composed demeanor showing cracks of exhaustion. Citizens of the Galactic Federation, Zex Thul's four arms gestured wearily. After 3 millennia of guiding our collective civilizations, the Hegemony Council has reached a unanimous decision. Effective immediately, we are stepping down from all administrative and leadership positions across Federation space. The bridge fell silent except for the hum of life support systems. Lieutenant Rodriguez stared at the screen with his mouth open. Commander Park slowly set down her data pad, her face pale. Sarah felt her stomach drop as the implications hit her like a physical blow. The Hegemony had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years. They were the ancient ones, the wise species who had uplifted dozens of younger races, including humanity barely 2 centuries ago. They possessed technology that seemed like magic, wisdom accumulated over eons, and the respect of every civilized world. They were supposed to be eternal, unchanging, reliable. "We have grown tired," Zex Thul continued, his translator struggling with concepts that had no human equivalent. "The burden of decision, the weight of countless lives, the endless cycles of mediation and judgment. We require rest, a return to our homeworlds, to contemplation and peace." Sarah's mind raced through the chaos this would create. Who would arbitrate the ongoing trade disputes between the Corvan Empire and the Beltron Confederacy? What about the terraforming projects on the Outer Rim, the defense grids protecting colony worlds, the complex shipping lanes that fed billions of beings across hundreds of systems? All administrative functions will transfer to local governance within 30 standard days, the High Arbiter announced. Emergency protocols are now in effect. Each species must determine its own path forward. The transmission ended abruptly, leaving nothing but static and stunned silence. "Sir," Rodriguez whispered, "what does this mean for us?" Sarah stared at the empty screen, her coffee growing cold in her hands. Humanity controlled maybe 40 systems in a galaxy of millions. They were barely past their technological infancy, still learning to navigate the complex web of galactic politics. Most human colonies depended entirely on hegemony infrastructure for everything from power generation to food distribution. "It means we're on our own," she said quietly. The next few hours brought a flood of panicked communications. Admiral Reyes called an emergency assembly of all human fleet commanders. Colony governors demanded immediate military protection. Trade partners began canceling contracts, unsure if human worlds could even maintain basic services without hegemony oversight. But as Sarah reviewed the crisis reports streaming across her desk, she began to notice something unexpected. While most species were paralyzed by the sudden power vacuum, humans were already moving. Captain Torres had taken initiative to establish direct supply lines between Earth and the agricultural colonies. Commander Williams was organizing civilian evacuation protocols for systems near hostile territory. Dr. Patel was coordinating with human scientists across 12 worlds to reverse engineer hegemony technologies they'd been using but never truly understood. The first real test came within a week. The Naxos system, a critical junction for interstellar commerce, descended into chaos when 3 different species claimed administrative authority. Trade convoys sat stranded in space while bureaucrats argued. Millions of beings faced potential starvation as food shipments backed up. Sarah received her orders during her morning briefing. Prometheus is tasked with maintaining order in the Naxos system until proper governance can be established. "Sir," she asked Admiral Reyes over the comm, "what exactly are our rules of engagement? The hegemony protocols don't cover this scenario." "Make it up as you go along, Captain," came the gruff reply. "Just keep people alive and cargo moving." When Prometheus arrived at Naxos Station, Sarah found a diplomatic nightmare. Corvan warships faced off against Beltron cruisers, while Thraxian merchant vessels drifted helplessly between them. The station's traffic control had shut down entirely, leaving hundreds of ships in dangerous proximity. Most Federation species would have called for mediation, filed formal complaints, and waited weeks for proper adjudication. Sarah looked at the potential catastrophe unfolding on her tactical display and made a characteristically human decision. She opened a channel to all vessels. "This is Captain Chen of the United Earthship Prometheus. I'm implementing emergency traffic control effective immediately. All military vessels will maintain position and power down weapons. Merchant traffic will resume under human coordination. Any ship that fires on another will answer to me personally." "By what authority do you make these demands?" came the indignant response from Corvan Admiral Vextar. "By the authority of being the only one here willing to prevent a disaster," Sarah replied bluntly. "You can file a complaint later. Right now, people are dying." The next 18 hours were the longest of Sarah's career. Using nothing but determination and improvised protocols, her crew managed to organize the chaotic traffic around Naxos. They established temporary supply chains, mediated disputes between traders, and somehow kept 3 different military fleets from shooting at each other. The breakthrough came when Dr. Yuki Tanaka, the ship's xenoanthropologist, pointed out something remarkable. "Captain, look at the efficiency reports. We're moving cargo through this system faster than the hegemony ever did." Sarah studied the data with growing amazement. Human coordination was messy, improvised, and completely unorthodox. But it worked. Where the hegemony had relied on elaborate bureaucratic procedures and careful deliberation, humans simply looked at problems and solved them as quickly as possible. "It's because we don't know better," Commander Park observed. "The hegemony would have formed committees and consulted databases and run simulations. We just saw ships that needed help and helped them." Word of humanity's success at Naxos spread quickly through Federation space. Other species began requesting human assistance with their own crisis situations. The Delian mining colonies asked for help reorganizing their shipping schedules. The Vorthon agricultural worlds needed new distribution networks. The Centauri research stations required coordination for their joint scientific projects. Each time, human officers arrived and did what came naturally to them. They ignored established protocols, improvised solutions, and made decisions based on immediate practical needs rather than long-term political considerations. It was chaotic, undiplomatic, and completely effective. Admiral Reyes found herself fielding requests from across the galaxy. Species that had barely acknowledged humanity's existence suddenly wanted human administrators, coordinators, and problem solvers. The irony wasn't lost on her that the youngest, least experienced species in the Federation was becoming its de facto leadership. Captain Chen's report from the Altair sector summarized the situation perfectly. "The Zenthari asked us to mediate their water rights dispute. Standard hegemony procedure would have taken 6 months and required testimony from 47 different environmental experts. I sat both sides down for 3 hours, looked at their maps, and drew new boundaries based on actual water flow patterns. Problem solved." They're calling it the human method and requesting our help with 6 more territorial disputes. But the real test was yet to come. 3 weeks after the hegemony withdrawal, long-range sensors detected something that made Sarah's blood run cold. A massive fleet was approaching from the galactic rim, ships of unknown configuration moving toward the heart of Federation space. The Zerathi had been the Federation's ancient enemy, held at bay for centuries only by hegemony military might. With the ancient protectors gone, nothing stood between the invasion force and the core worlds except whatever defenses the member species could hastily organize. Sarah stood on her bridge, watching the tactical display show the approaching threat. Around her, her crew worked with quiet efficiency, preparing for a battle that could determine the fate of galactic civilization. She thought about the hegemony's careful strategies, their elaborate war plans, their measured responses to threats. Then she smiled grimly and opened a channel to the human fleet. "All ships, this is Admiral Chen." The promotion had come through an hour ago, along with operational command of the Federation's hastily assembled defense force. "We're going to do this the human way." The alien crews serving alongside humans looked confused. The human way wasn't a recognized military doctrine, it wasn't taught in academies or codified in manuals. But as Admiral Chen began outlining her plan, they began to understand. The hegemony would have met the Zarathi with defensive formations, protecting key systems while engaging in careful strategic warfare. Chen intended to take the entire human fleet straight to the Zarathi homeworld. "Sir," Commander Park asked quietly, "are you certain about this approach?" "The Zarathi are expecting us to defend," Chen replied. "They've planned for siege warfare, for grinding through our defenses system by system. They're not expecting us to knock on their front door and ask if they want to discuss terms." As the human fleet prepared to jump to hyperspace, Sarah received a final message from Earth. President Martinez appeared on screen, looking older than she remembered. "Admiral, the entire species is counting on you, no pressure." Sarah almost laughed. 6 months ago, she'd been a mid-level starship captain ferrying diplomats between trade meetings. Now, she was commanding a military force larger than anything humanity had ever assembled, about to attempt the most audacious military strategy in galactic history. "Mr. President," she replied, "we've got this." The jump to hyperspace carried the fleet toward the unknown, toward an enemy that had terrorized the galaxy for millennia, toward a confrontation that would determine whether the Zarathi homeworld of Cathara, hung in space like a malevolent red eye, its surface scarred by millennia of military production. Admiral Chen stood before the massive view screen on her flagship, watching as her fleet dropped out of hyperspace directly above the enemy capital. Around her, the bridge crew worked in tense silence, monitoring sensors that showed a planet bristling with orbital defenses and millions of warships. "Admiral," reported Commander Yates from the sensor station, "I'm reading approximately 12,000 enemy vessels in system. They're not moving to intercept." Chen nodded grimly. The Zarathi were clearly as shocked by humanity's approach as she'd hoped. Standard Federation doctrine called for defensive warfare, slowly retreating while inflicting maximum casualties. No one had ever brought a fleet directly to the enemy homeworld, while their invasion force was still weeks away from Federation space. "Open a channel to the Zarathi Command Center," she ordered. Lieutenant Rodriguez looked uncertain. "Sir, we don't have established protocols for communicating with the Zarathi. The hegemony handled all diplomatic contact." "Then we'll figure it out ourselves," Chen replied. "Broadcast on all frequencies every language we know." The response came within minutes. A being unlike anything in Federation space appeared on screen, its insectoid features twisted with what might have been rage or confusion. When it spoke, the translator struggled with clicking consonants and harmonic overtones. "Unknown vessels, you dare approach the sacred heart of the Zarathi Empire. Your presence here violates 10,000 years of established boundaries. Explain yourself before we reduce your fleet to cosmic dust." Admiral Chen took a deep breath. Everything she'd learned about diplomacy, about careful negotiation and measured responses, told her to begin with formal greetings and establish common ground. Instead, she did what felt natural. "I'm Admiral Chen of the human fleet. Your invasion force is heading toward Federation space, while your population centers are completely undefended. I'm here to discuss whether you really want to continue this war while I'm sitting on top of your most important worlds." The Zarathi commander's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sound the translator interpreted as extreme agitation. "You threaten genocide? You would destroy billions of civilians?" "I'm not threatening anything," Chen replied calmly. "I'm pointing out that your military strategy has a significant flaw. You've committed your entire fleet to an invasion while leaving your homeworld protected by automated defenses. It's tactically unsound. For several long moments, silence filled the comm channel. Chen could almost hear the Zarathi commander's mind working, trying to process this unprecedented situation. The Federation had never responded to Zarathi aggression with offensive action. For centuries, they had fought purely defensive wars, protecting their territory while the hegemony managed complex diplomatic solutions. "What do you propose, human?" the Zarathi finally asked. "Simple. Call back your invasion fleet, and we'll withdraw from your space. We'll establish proper diplomatic channels and work out our differences like civilized beings. Or continue your invasion and find out what happens when you leave your population centers undefended while starting wars with people who solve problems differently than you're used to." The channel went dark. Chen waited, watching the tactical display as Zarathi ships began moving in complex formations around their homeworld. She'd gambled everything on the assumption that the Zarathi, like most intelligent species, would choose survival over conquest when faced with an impossible situation. Commander Park approached her station quietly. "Admiral, what if they call our bluff?" "Who says we're bluffing?" Chen replied. "If they want to continue this war while we're here, that's their choice. We'll respond accordingly." The bridge fell silent again. Chen's crew knew her well enough to understand that she wasn't making empty threats. The human approach to warfare had already proven unconventional enough to surprise their allies. Their enemies were about to learn just how far that unconventional thinking could extend. Hours passed before the Zarathi responded. When the communication channel reopened, a different being appeared on screen, older and more elaborately decorated than the first commander. "I am Supreme War Leader Krextal of the Zarathi Empire. You have placed us in an unprecedented situation." "I'm good at unprecedented," Chen replied. "Have you reached a decision?" "Our invasion fleet will withdraw to neutral space. We propose immediate negotiations for a permanent settlement of territorial disputes." Chen nodded slowly. "That sounds reasonable. I'll have my diplomatic staff prepare for formal talks." "You will withdraw your fleet from our space?" "Of course. Once your invasion force is confirmed heading home, we'll return to Federation territory. This was about stopping a war, not starting one." The channel closed again, leaving Chen's bridge crew staring at their admiral in amazement. In less than 6 hours, humanity had ended a war that the hegemony had been managing for centuries. The approach had been risky to the point of madness, but it had worked. Dr. Tanaka shook her head in wonder. "Admiral, do you realize what you just accomplished? The Zarathi haven't agreed to negotiations in over 200 years. "They just needed the right incentive," Chen replied. "Sometimes the direct approach works better than elaborate diplomacy." The news of humanity's success at Cathera spread across the galaxy faster than hyperspace communications should have allowed. Within days, Admiral Chen found herself fielding calls from dozens of species requesting human intervention in their own conflicts. The Corvan Beltran trade war, the Zenthari territorial disputes, the Thaxian succession crisis, and half a dozen other problems that had been festering for decades under hegemony bureaucracy. Captain Torres called from the border systems with an update on the refugee situation. "Admiral, we've got 17 different species asking for help organizing evacuation routes from the conflict zones. They're saying human logistics are more efficient than anything they've seen." "How are we managing that?" Chen asked. "We barely have enough ships to handle our own territories." "That's the interesting part," Torres replied. "We're not doing it with more resources. We're doing it with better coordination. Human officers are making decisions in minutes that would have taken hegemony committees weeks to approve. We're cutting through bureaucracy and just moving people where they need to go." The pattern was becoming clear across Federation space. Where other species got bogged down in procedures and protocols, Humans simply looked at problems and solved them with whatever resources were available. It wasn't elegant or sophisticated, but it was remarkably effective. President Martinez called from Earth with news from the home front. Admiral, Congress is debating whether to formally accept leadership of the Federation. Half the Senate thinks we're not ready for this kind of responsibility. Chen considered that for a moment. Mr. President, with respect, I don't think anyone asked us to take leadership. We just started solving problems because someone needed to, and apparently we're good at it. That's exactly what the other half of the Senate is saying, Martinez replied with a grin. Dr. Walsh from the Xenocultural Committee thinks humans have a natural advantage in crisis management because we evolved in a chaotic environment. We're used to adapting quickly to changing circumstances. The theory made sense to Chen. Humanity had spent most of its history dealing with unpredictable challenges, from climate changes to resource shortages to social upheavals. Other species had developed under more stable conditions, with established hierarchies and time-tested procedures for every situation. But the real test of humanity's new role came 2 weeks later, when long-range sensors detected something that made Chen's previous challenges look simple by comparison. The Void Seekers had been the Federation's nightmare scenario for over a millennium. Ancient beyond measure, they emerged from dark space every few centuries to harvest entire star systems, consuming all organic life before disappearing back into the galactic void. The hegemony had spent enormous resources developing early warning systems and evacuation protocols, but had never found a way to actually stop them. Now they were coming again. Their harvest ships detected on the edge of Sector 7, moving slowly but inexorably toward populated systems. Admiral Chen received the emergency briefing while her fleet was still returning from Zarathi space. The scope of the threat was almost incomprehensible. The Void Seekers controlled technology that made hegemony science look primitive. Their ships could drain stars of energy, strip planets down to bedrock, and convert entire ecosystems into whatever alien purpose drove their species. Estimated time to reach the first inhabited systems? Chen asked. 6 weeks, Admiral, replied her intelligence officer. The Centauri colonies will be first, then the Delian mining worlds. Chen studied the tactical display showing the Void Seekers' projected path. Standard Federation response would be to evacuate the threatened systems and establish defensive perimeters around core worlds. It was a sound strategy that had worked for centuries, saving billions of lives even if it meant sacrificing outlying territories. But Chen found herself thinking about the Zarathi homeworld, about the look of surprise on their commander's face when humanity did the unexpected. "What do we know about Void Seeker technology?" she asked. Dr. Patel accessed the files on his console. "Very little, Admiral. The hegemony classified most research on them. What we do know suggests they're completely dependent on harvesting energy from stellar objects. Their ships require massive amounts of power to maintain their systems. So they need stars to function? Essentially, yes. They tap directly into stellar cores using some kind of exotic matter manipulation. It's how they can strip entire systems so quickly." Chen stared at the display for a long moment, an idea forming that was either brilliant or completely insane. Probably both, which seemed to describe most human solutions to impossible problems. "Dr. Patel, what would happen if someone destabilized a star while the Void Seekers were trying to harvest it?" The scientist looked confused. "Admiral, the energy release would be catastrophic. It could destroy everything within several light years. But would it destroy their harvest ships? Almost certainly, but Admiral, we don't have the technology to destabilize stars." "That's beyond anything in Federation science." Chen smiled grimly. "No, but we do have access to hegemony archives, and I'm betting they studied every possible defense against the Void Seekers, including the ones they considered too dangerous to actually use." The next 48 hours saw frantic research across a dozen human vessels. Teams of scientists worked around the clock, diving into classified hegemony files that the ancient species had locked away for good reason. What they found was exactly what Chen had hoped for and feared. The hegemony had indeed developed stellar destabilization technology, along with detailed plans for using it against the Void Seekers. They had also calculated that the plan would work, destroying the harvest ships and ending the threat permanently. They had chosen not to implement it, because the side effects would sterilize half the galaxy. Chen read the final report with growing understanding of why the hegemony had grown tired of leadership. For 3 millennia, they had been forced to make impossible choices, balancing the survival of galactic civilization against risks that could destroy everything they were trying to protect. Now that choice fell to humanity. Admiral Chen stood before her senior staff, looking at the faces of officers who had followed her through every impossible situation. They had trusted her judgment when she had taken them to the Zarathi homeworld, when she had ended centuries of war with a single conversation. Now she was asking them to trust her with something that could save the galaxy or destroy it. "The math is clear," she told them quietly. "We can use hegemony technology to stop the Void Seekers permanently, but the stellar cascades will sterilize everything within 50 light-years of the target system. We're talking about sacrificing uninhabited systems to save populated worlds." Commander Park was the first to speak. "How many lives are we talking about saving versus risking?" "The Void Seekers will kill approximately 40 billion beings in the next century if their harvest continues," Dr. Patel reported. "The stellar destabilization will eliminate all life in 12 uninhabited systems and render 14 others uninhabitable for approximately 10,000 years. "Empty systems?" Chen asked. "No intelligent life detected in any of them. Some primitive ecosystems that would be lost." The silence stretched for several minutes before Lieutenant Rodriguez spoke up. "Admiral, what would the hegemony have done?" Chen thought about that question, about the weight of responsibility that had driven an entire species into retirement. They would have saved who they could and managed the ongoing crisis. They were too wise to risk destroying the galaxy to save it. "But we're not wise enough to know better?" Park asked with a slight smile. "Maybe wisdom isn't always the answer," Chen replied. "Maybe sometimes you need to be young and stupid enough to try the dangerous solution." She looked around the room at her officers, seeing the same determination in their faces that had carried them through every challenge. They weren't the wisest species in the galaxy, or the most advanced, or the most experienced, but they were the ones willing to make the hard choice when someone had to. "All right, people. We're going to kill some gods." Anit. The stellar engineering ship Icarus drifted in the shadow of Kepler 442. An unremarkable yellow star at the edge of Void Seeker territory. Admiral Chen watched from the bridge as her engineering teams made final preparations for what might be either humanity's greatest triumph or its final mistake. Dr. Patel stood beside her, nervously checking readings on his tablet for the 100th time. "Admiral, the hegemony calculations show a 97% probability of success. But the margin for error is essentially 0. If we miscalculate the cascade timing by even a few seconds, then we destroy half the galaxy instead of saving it," Chen finished. "I know, Doctor, but if we do nothing, the Void Seekers will continue their harvest for millennia. Sometimes you have to risk everything to save anything." The plan was audaciously simple in concept, terrifyingly complex in execution. The Void Seekers would arrive at Kepler 442 in 18 hours, expecting to drain its stellar energy using their standard harvest techniques. Instead, they would find the star primed for catastrophic collapse, its core destabilized by exotic matter injections timed to detonate precisely when their harvest ships achieved maximum connection with the stellar matrix. The resulting explosion would be unlike anything seen in galactic history. The star would collapse and then explode with the force of a hypernova, releasing enough energy to destroy anything within light years. More importantly, the exotic matter interactions would create a cascade effect that would propagate through the Void Seeker's quantum entanglement network, theoretically destroying their entire fleet instantaneously. Theoretically. "Engineering teams report ready, Admiral," came the voice of Commander Kim over the comm. "All exotic matter charges are in position. We can initiate the destabilization sequence on your command." Chen nodded, then opened a channel to the rest of her fleet. "All ships, this is Admiral Chen. In approximately 17 hours, we're going to attempt something that has never been tried before. If our calculations are correct, we'll end the Void Seeker threat permanently. If we're wrong, we might end everything." She paused, looking at the tactical display showing her small fleet positioned at the edge of the system. 300 ships carrying humanity's best and brightest, all volunteering for a mission that might be remembered as either salvation or suicide. "I want every one of you to know that this was my decision alone. History will judge whether I was a hero or the fool who destroyed the galaxy. But right now, we're the only thing standing between 40 billion innocent beings and an enemy that has terrorized the galaxy for millennia." The response was immediate and unanimous. Every ship in the fleet signaled ready status. No hesitation, no requests for clarification, no demands for additional safety measures. The human fleet was prepared to risk everything on their admiral's judgment. 6 hours later, long-range sensors detected the first Void Seeker ships emerging from dark space. Chen watched the readings with growing awe and terror as the alien vessels became visible on her screens. Each ship was larger than anything in the Federation fleet, their hulls seeming to absorb light itself, giving them the appearance of holes cut directly into reality. "Admiral," reported Lieutenant Rodriguez, "I'm reading 15 harvest ships and approximately 50 escort vessels. They're maintaining standard approach formation." Chen studied the enemy formation with professional interest. The Void Seekers moved with the confidence of predators who had never encountered effective resistance. Their ships approached Kepler 442 in perfect formation, showing no signs of caution or awareness that anything unusual awaited them. "They have no idea what we've done to their target," observed Commander Park. "To them, this is just another harvest." "Let's hope they maintain that attitude for the next 11 hours, Chen replied. As the Void Seeker fleet drew closer to Kepler 442, Chen's scientists monitored the stellar engineering charges with obsessive attention. The exotic matter had to remain stable until the exact moment of detonation, requiring constant micro-adjustments to account for solar flares and gravitational fluctuations. "Dr. Patel, how are our charges holding up?" "Stable within acceptable parameters, Admiral. The star's core temperature is rising slightly ahead of schedule, but nothing we can't compensate for." Chen nodded, then turned her attention to the broader picture. Across Federation space, evacuation fleets were moving millions of beings out of potentially affected systems. The warning had gone out as soon as humanity committed to the plan. Prepare for possible stellar cascades across a significant portion of the galaxy. The response had been remarkable. Species that had been paralyzed by the hegemony withdrawal suddenly demonstrated incredible organizational efficiency when faced with a clear deadline and specific instructions. Human coordination had helped, but the real work was being done by beings who had found their own capacity for rapid decision-making when the situation demanded it. "Admiral Chen," came a transmission from Captain Torres in the Aldebaran system. "Civilian evacuation is ahead of schedule. The Zenthari have been particularly helpful in organizing refugee camps." "Any resistance to the evacuation orders?" "Surprisingly little. Most species seem to understand the stakes. Even the ones who aren't directly threatened are helping with logistics." Chen found that encouraging. Perhaps the galaxy was learning to solve problems the human way, with quick decisions and immediate action instead of endless deliberation. With 3 hours remaining until the Void Seekers reached optimal harvest position, Chen received an unexpected communication. High Arbiter Zexthul appeared on her screen, the ancient being looking older and more tired than she remembered. Admiral Chen, we have been monitoring your preparations. High Arbiter, Chen replied respectfully. I thought your people had withdrawn from galactic affairs. We have, but this action affects the fundamental structure of our galaxy. We feel compelled to offer our perspective. Chen waited, curious to hear what the wisest species in known space thought of humanity's desperate gamble. What you are attempting has occurred to us many times over the millennia, Zexthul continued. We chose not to pursue it because the risks were deemed unacceptable. The risks of doing nothing seemed worse, Chen replied. Perhaps, but you should understand that this action will change everything. If you succeed, humanity will have demonstrated power beyond anything previously imagined. Other species will either revere you as saviors or fear you as destroyers. There will be no returning to the simple role of junior partners in galactic civilization. Chen considered that soberly. She had been focused on the immediate tactical problem, not the long-term political implications. If humanity could destroy stars at will, they would instantly become either the galaxy's protectors or its greatest threat. High Arbiter, what would you do in my position? The ancient being was silent for a long moment. We would probably make the safe choice and accept millions of deaths rather than risk billions. But we are tired, Admiral. Perhaps it is time for younger species to make the hard choices we could no longer face. The transmission ended, leaving Chen to contemplate the weight of responsibility that the hegemony had carried for 3,000 years. No wonder they had grown exhausted. Admiral, Dr. Patel called urgently. The Void Seekers are beginning harvest operations. We need to initiate the destabilization sequence now if we want to catch them at maximum vulnerability. Chen took a deep breath, looking one last time at the tactical display showing the alien harvest fleet connected to Kepler 442 by streams of exotic energy. This was the moment of truth, the point where theory would become reality and humanity would discover whether they had saved the galaxy or doomed it. All stations, prepare for stellar destabilization. Dr. Patel, initiate the sequence. The exotic matter charges detonated simultaneously deep within the star's core, invisible from space, but immediately detected by every sensor in the system. The star's fusion reactions began to destabilize, core temperatures spiking beyond sustainable levels as the exotic matter created cascading quantum fluctuations. Stellar collapse commencing, reported Dr. Patel. Core density rising exponentially. We have approximately 90 seconds until total collapse. On the tactical display, the Void Seeker ships continued their harvest operations, apparently unaware that their target star was about to become a hypernova. Their technology was so advanced that they probably couldn't conceive of anyone deliberately destabilizing a star for military purposes. 60 seconds to collapse. Void Seeker harvest ships are still at maximum connection with the stellar matrix. Chen watched the countdown with the same calm focus she had brought to every impossible situation. Around her, the bridge crew worked with quiet efficiency, monitoring systems and preparing for the massive energy pulse that was about to wash over them. 30 seconds. All fleet ships report ready for emergency jump to hyperspace. Admiral, Commander Park asked quietly. Any final orders? Chen smiled grimly. If this works, we'll probably never live it down. If it doesn't work, we won't live at all. Either way, we tried something that needed trying. 10 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Kepler 442 collapsed. The explosion that followed was beyond anything in recorded galactic history. The star's death released energy equivalent to 1 billion normal supernovas, the exotic matter interactions creating quantum cascades that rippled through space-time itself. The Void Seeker ships, caught at maximum connection with the stellar matrix, were vaporized instantly as the explosion propagated through their quantum entanglement network. But the real miracle was what happened next. Instead of spreading uncontrollably across the galaxy, the cascade effects collapsed back on themselves, contained by the same quantum entanglement that had destroyed the Void Seeker fleet. The explosion burned itself out within hours, leaving nothing but an expanding nebula where Kepler 442 had once shone. "Admiral," Dr. Patel reported in amazement, "long-range sensors show no Void Seeker ships anywhere in the galaxy. The quantum cascade appears to have reached every vessel in their fleet simultaneously." Chen stared at the sensor readings, hardly able to believe what they showed. The plan had worked. Not only had they destroyed the immediate threat, but they had eliminated the entire Void Seeker civilization in a single stroke. Casualty report? "No Federation losses, Admiral. The blast zone was completely evacuated, and the cascade contained itself within the predicted parameters." The bridge erupted in cheers. But Chen felt only exhaustion. They had won, but at the cost of becoming something unprecedented in galactic history. Humanity now possessed the demonstrated ability to destroy entire star systems at will. The political implications would reshape galactic civilization for millennia to come. Over the next weeks, as the evacuated populations returned to their worlds and normal commerce resumed, Chen found herself dealing with an endless stream of diplomatic communications. Every species in the Federation wanted to establish closer ties with humanity. Many offered formal alliances, some requested protection, and a few expressed barely concealed fear of their new human neighbors. The hegemony sent one final message, delivered by High Arbiter Zexthul himself. "Admiral Chen, we congratulate humanity on its victory over the Void Seekers. We also formally transfer all remaining administrative authority to human oversight. Your species has demonstrated both the courage and capability necessary for galactic leadership." "High Arbiter," Chen replied, "we never asked for leadership. Neither did we 3,000 years ago. Leadership is not taken, Admiral. It is earned through actions that prove worthiness. Humanity has earned it." 6 months later, Admiral Chen stood in the newly established Human Galactic Coordination Center on Luna, looking out at Earth through the transparent aluminum windows. She had been promoted to Supreme Admiral of Federation Forces, a position that didn't exist until humanity created it by necessity. President Martinez joined her at the observation deck, carrying 2 cups of coffee and looking tired from endless diplomatic meetings. "Any regrets about how everything turned out?" he asked, handing her one of the cups. Chen sipped the coffee thoughtfully. In the past year, humanity had gone from junior partners in galactic civilization to de facto leaders of the largest political entity in known space. They coordinated trade between hundreds of worlds, mediated disputes between species that had been enemies for millennia, and maintained military forces capable of protecting or destroying entire star systems. "I regret that it was necessary," she said finally. "But I don't regret that we did it." "The galaxy seems to be adjusting well to human administration." "That's because we're not trying to rule anyone," Chen observed. "We're just solving problems as they come up the same way we always have. Apparently that's enough." Through the window, she could see ships from dozens of species docking at Luna Station, crews working together with the casual efficiency that had become the hallmark of human-coordinated operations. The galaxy had indeed adjusted to humanity's unexpected rise, finding that the new leadership style emphasized practical solutions over elegant bureaucracy. The Corvin and Beltran had settled their trade disputes through human mediation in 3 weeks, compared to decades of hegemony negotiations. The Zenthari territorial issues had been resolved with simple boundary adjustments based on actual resource distribution rather than historical claims. The Zarathi had become active trading partners, their warrior culture surprisingly compatible with human directness. "Admiral," came a voice over the comm system, "we're receiving a priority transmission from the Andromeda Contact Project." Chen set down her coffee and activated the communication panel. Dr. Sarah Kim appeared on screen, her face showing excitement mixed with concern. "Admiral, we've detected response signals to our deep space transmissions. There are other galactic civilizations out there, and they're trying to communicate." Chen felt a familiar combination of anticipation and apprehension. Just when the galaxy seemed to be settling into peaceful routine under human coordination, new challenges appeared. But that was the human way, she reflected. They didn't seek out problems, but they faced them when they arose. "How many civilizations are we talking about, Doctor?" "At least 12 that we can detect, possibly more. Some of them appear to be significantly more advanced than Federation technology." Chen smiled grimly. "More advanced aliens, new diplomatic challenges, potential threats, or allies beyond current imagining." A year ago, she would have called for careful study, extensive preparation, and cautious first contact protocols. Instead, she found herself asking the characteristically human question, when can we talk to them? As humanity prepared to make contact with civilizations beyond their galaxy, Chen realized that their reluctant rise to leadership was really just beginning. The galaxy had turned out to be a small neighborhood compared to the universe beyond. But humans had already proven they could handle the impossible. Whatever challenges waited among the stars, they would face them the same way they had faced everything else, with determination, improvisation, and the absolute refusal to accept that some problems couldn't be solved. The hegemony had been wise enough to know their limitations. Humanity was young enough not to believe in them. And somehow, that made all the difference. A sudden rise to galactic prominence was a brief anomaly or the beginning of something unprecedented. As the stars streaked past her view screen, Admiral Chen couldn't help but wonder what the hegemony would think of what was about to happen. They had spent 3,000 years maintaining careful balance, preventing exactly this kind of reckless military adventure. But the hegemony was gone, and humanity was in charge now. For better or worse, the galaxy was about to discover what happened when the youngest species decided to solve problems with characteristic human directness. The real test was just beginning.